Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you, appreciate that. Good morning. Well, I was thinking about what I was going to say to introduce myself to this group, given the fact that I do have a lot of friends in this group. And I was thinking, I have done many trainings in motivational interviewing, and it never gets old. I really enjoy the work I do. But I was thinking, I feel very qualified to do that. I was thinking about the title, the name of this group, and how absolutely unqualified I am to talk to you guys. And I was thinking also about this group is that I've heard of the Women's Consortium, in that I know many people who are part of it, and I've gotten some really excellent referrals from this group. So I'm really happy to be here. It feels like a group, it was sort of like Smith College when I went to college. I always wanted to be part of that and I could never get in. And so I feel that way about this group, although I see that there are some men kind of leaking in here, so there's a chance for me yet. I wanted to tell you before I get started how absolutely lucky I feel to have been exposed to motivational interviewing over 20 years ago. And the reason I feel lucky is because everything else I learned about being a therapist, everything I learned about psychodynamic thought, everything I learned about CBT, relapse prevention, DBT, performance psychology, whatever it is, I learned through the lens of motivational interviewing. And it has really helped me to retain a sense of how I can stay connected to people while I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do, whatever that thing is that I'm trying to do. So I just wanted to show you it's not exactly proof, but this is what I looked like when I first learned about motivational interviewing. In fact, I lucked out. I walked into a building at NYU, and there was a sign on the wall, and it said, research interns. So I was actually bartending at the time, and this was about addiction. I was like, oh, cool, I'll put into practice what I'm seeing every day at my night job while I'm at NYU. So I went up to Smithers, which was a substance abuse clinic up at Roosevelt. This is 20 years ago. And Jeff Foote was there, who's founded with Carrie Wilkins, the Center for Motivation and Change. And they were doing this thing called motivational interviewing. I'm literally 20 years old. I have a lot more hair, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I read this MI book. It was like maybe the second edition at the time, or the first edition. And it really did two things. One, it opened me up to having a framework for how to talk to people. And also, it reinforced some of my beliefs about how important things like empathy and kindness and connection are in everything that we do. And how sometimes, I'll speak for myself, I gravitate away from that when I get frustrated, or I'm not speaking for you guys, when I get frustrated, or when people don't seem to see things that feel very apparent or evident that they should do. So enough about me. I want to learn about you really quickly. We don't have a lot of time because despite the rain, thank you. As Justina said, there's a lot of people here. And I want to just learn about you really quickly. Please stand up if you've been in the field of mental health for 2 years or more. Please remain standing if you've been in the field of mental health for 5 years or more. Please remain standing if you've been in the field of mental health for 10 years or more. Please remain standing if you've been in the field of mental health for 20 years or more. Please remain standing if you've been in the field of mental health for 25 years or more. And please continue to stand up if you've been in the field of mental health for 30 years or more. Please remain standing if you've been in the field of mental health for 40 years or more. Please remain standing if you're in the field of mental health for 500 years or more. Please, everybody, let's have a round of applause, really. Okay, so here's the thing about that. One, every time I do that, I actually get chills just seeing the experience that's in the room, and also the obstacle that lies ahead in the next 50 minutes, which is the more experience we have, including myself, the less we're able to see if and how we can change in the work that we're doing. So I have one ask of everybody in this room, and that's to look at everything that you see with the attitude of, how can this help me in my work? Okay? How can this help me in my work? It's really easy to gravitate towards, oh, I know this already, or I know this about the work that I'm doing. And I think it's up to you, because I can't control anything that you guys decide to do. But I'm going to invite you to take on what we call a beginner's mind. And one way to think about it is by this quote by Suzuki. In the beginner's mind, There are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. So we're trying to take on a beginner's mind on everything we learn about motivational interviewing. That's really the goal. And that's really what I'm hoping that we'll all do as we learn about that. So, the other thing I just want to say in the way I do motivational interviewing training, whether it's a 2-day training or just an hour, is I really believe that we don't learn a lot if I just talk. So if I'm just talking for 45 minutes, I feel like you guys are going to get relatively little. You remember that I had more hair in the 90s than I do now, and that's probably about it. So I want you guys to retain something from this and take it home. How much would you learn if I just talked and lectured off PowerPoint slides for the next 45 minutes? What percent do you think you'd retain? You got to get rid of your academic mind here. Don't get too into the research study here, but just what percent do you think you might retain if we tested you on your knowledge about what I was talking about? Yeah, it's about 5%. Yeah, it's about 5 to 10%. Not a plant. Obviously, you see my shock that it came from over the side of the room. What if you actually interacted with the material and I give you an opportunity to try it out a little bit or to participate in some way? It became experiential learning. What percent might you retain? Yeah, it's around there. It depends on how good we are together, right? But I would say it's 50 to 60. If it's 75, I'm a really happy person, right? But it's higher. And so my goal is to create opportunities. We can't do all of them, but to create opportunities in any MI training, whether it's an hour or a longer training, for you guys to actually interact in some way. And we're going to do that right now in a minute. What we're going to do right now in 1 minute is what we do in a lot of MI trainings, which is called real play. Who has participated in a role play in a lecture or talk on clinical work or raise your hand if you've ever been in a role play. I'm not going to call on you. I'm just, okay, good. So what's a role play? What is that? You're pretending, and in a real play, you are? So who are you? Yourself. So we're going to do a real play, which means we're going to try out some of the precepts or some of the ideas of what gets involved in motivational interviewing, but with our own material, behaviors or situations in our lives, our own lives, that we are trying to change, ambivalent about changing, having some trouble changing. So go ahead and think about that thing in your life that you're trying to change. Now, it should be something that you feel comfortable sharing with the group. You're not going to be asked to share it, but it should be something that you feel comfortable sharing with the group, which means it should be rated G, rated PG, or at the most PG-13 behavior or situation, right? We're not going to go into the R or NC-17. So it could be, for my life, one of the things that I struggle with is how to find the time for myself. That's one of the things that I kind of battle in my life, is how to take time out for myself. The other thing that I really battle with is just time management in general. I also have like a burgeoning Nintendo Switch thing going on that I have to really modulate. So there's a bunch of different things I could talk about. So what we'll do is, you're going to take about 90 seconds, and I'd like you to talk to your partner about how you can be helped in this area of your life. How you could be helped in this area of your life.
You mean you tell yourself?
No, you're telling your partner. Yeah, the partner that you're going to work with. So you're going to tell your partner about how you could be helped. Hold on a second, hold on a second. It gets worse. It gets worse. Hold on. That's the first part. That actually is the easiest part. So what I want you to do is I'd tell your partner for 90 seconds about how you can be helped in your life. What I'd like you to do as your partner, as the partner of this person, is to listen in complete and utter silence for the time that the others speak. So no verbal utterance. No. Now, this is not stopping you from doing a minimal encourager or something that you're using your body to let them know that you're listening. In fact, I'd like you to do everything you can to show them that you're really 100% present. Almost like they're the only human that exists in the world at this point. But you're not going to say anything. You're not, and no cheating. No cheating, right? You're just showing them that you're there. Okay? You're not going to say anything. You're just with them 100% with your brain, with your heart, wherever you feel that. And you're letting go of words or any sound. I'll tell you guys when it's time to switch. The listener will become the speaker. The speaker will become the listener. And everything I just said, I'm going to put up on the screen. So if you want to look at that for a refresher. And if you have any questions, just simply raise your hand and I'll come over to you and walk you through it. So when I say go, you're going to talk to a partner for 90 seconds about how you can be helped. You're going to listen, the other person is going to listen in complete silence, but show that you're there. I'll tell you when to switch. Speaker becomes listener, listener becomes speaker. Any general questions? If you have a need a number, just raise your hand, and someone else who doesn't have a partner will also raise their hand, and you'll find them, and I will help be a matchmaker. Yeah. Oh, go. Okay, go ahead. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. First of all, go ahead and give your partner some love for listening to you. Go ahead and give them some love. Give them some love. Give them some love. Like this. Like this.
I was like, what is he talking about?
Okay, now go ahead and tell your partner something positive that you saw them doing that showed you they were listening, something that you observed. They weren't supposed to be talking, but go ahead and tell your partner something positive, an observation. Okay, so here's the first question for you all. What did you see your partner doing that showed you they weren't supposed to be saying anything or giving any sounds or words, but raise your hand and let me know, what did your partner do to show you they were there, that they were really listening?
Eye contact.
So there was some eye contact, there was some leaning in, nodding. Mirroring, let's break down mirroring a little bit. What do you guys mean by mirroring? Assume I'm an alien, I just landed here from another planet. What does mirroring mean?
I think,
Right, so some of the mirroring was being aware of what you're doing and then adjusting your positioning in your body or your affect to what the person is doing and trying to stay attuned for that 90 seconds.
Facial expression that registered that I said something that she wasn't expecting to hear, and that it was, that she was processing.
Right, so there's something also about the way that people, the gestures they made and their faces, something that the expression they had was like a word at times, or an indication that they were following and tracking where you were at. Anything else if people want to add to that? Yeah.
I think it's interesting how you notice someone's facial expression that they might actually have empathy with.
Right, so empathy is not only the words that we say, empathy is also what we're doing with our face and our bodies. Great, other observations? So here's the other question. Oh, sorry.
I was going to mention breathing, and obviously, my partner's breathing because she's alive. But I
Thank God, that'll be a first in any training I did.
That sense of she's fully there and she's fully present. I can kind of feel that, and that was like that sense of relaxation and attunement.
Well, cool. So the other thing you're talking about is also, I think you guys are towing the line now between self-awareness in terms of EQ and self-regulation. That there's something regulating about seeing your partner breathing in a way or being present and relaxed while they were also being empathic or listening without using words. What about the other side of it? As a listener, what was difficult about listening in silence? That, right? What was difficult about it? Yeah.
You want to reassure, I wanted to say, of course it's hard.
You want to reassure, you want to say to the person, of course it's hard. You want to reassure them. So that's one of the things that's driving speaking, okay?
Even just saying, like, I get it, I understand, like, just without even words.
So the other thing about this I think you're alluding to is just the habit of being a therapist or being a counselor or a helper, the habit of these minimal encouragers verbally. Right, okay, so another thing that happens is when we have a similar experience to someone, we might want to share our personal experience. with them, or to say, hey, I feel the same way as you do because I've gone through that in some way. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask further questions.
So a curiosity, wanting to know more. Right? We have a desire to know more about what's happening. So as I thought, yes, last time?
I also felt like I was looking for hanging, you know, like she's just hanging there with all these feelings coming out, and I didn't want to leave her hanging.
Totally, when we don't speak, it's almost like we see someone hanging off a bridge there. And they're like, help me, help. And we're just like, hey, just hang there a few more minutes, it's okay. There's that anxiety that of someone who needs help that we're not giving. And as I thought with this group of experienced people, I rarely get up to 40 years plus when I do that exercise that we did, where how much experience do you have? There's a bunch of experience in this room, and I thought we'd get to the heart of it pretty quickly, and we did, which is, I think the most important part of what I'm going to talk about today is how, as counselors, we deal with that desire to help, and how that sometimes pushes us to jump in too quickly. And by jumping too quickly, I don't mean, I'm sort of known as a CBT guy. I don't think of myself in that way, but I don't mean just with a structured idea or a technique or a strategy. I mean with an interpretation. I mean with trying to understand what's happening between me and you. I mean with psychodynamic, whatever it is that you do. That what we sometimes end up doing is we get driven by this desire to help. And it may push us to jump in too quickly into something that's happening in the relationship or the conversation. And so what we call that in motivational interviewing is the righting reflex. We see something going on with someone. We see something that's not right. We see something that needs help. And we tend to sometimes jump in too quickly with our help, with our advice, with giving information or sharing about ourselves, or whatever it is that's the effective treatment. And so a lot of what I hope that we can think about today as you're hearing about this is much less for a bunch of experienced therapists about learning the actual techniques of motivational interviewing, but about understanding what we're going to talk about in a minute, which is the underlying spirit, which is to be in a stance that we're really not jumping in if the person's not ready for the advice or the idea or the thing, and to know what to do when we catch ourselves in the moment jumping in too quickly and giving advice or giving our expertise or offering information. We see the thing that's wrong and we just want to jump in and grab it. And so a lot of what I'm going to think about today, and hopefully as we move on to the kind of question and answer period, we'll talk about our own struggles in that. Because Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick, who invented this technique, and really talk about this idea of the MI spirit as being most important. This righting reflex is so strong that I want to show you a hilarious video about it. It's so strong to try to have our brains point out what's wrong immediately. Check it out. Just sent me that video.
Your wife.
My wife. Except, I feel like in this group we'll appreciate this, we're defying gender roles here. She said, that's totally you. You're the woman in this, and I'm the dude, right? I'm the one who's always practical and and you're the one who's like, but just listen how I feel about this. So we're defying some of that, I think, stereotyping that's happening in the video. Really interestingly enough, I had this experience around with my wife around listening, which was shows how I think we can all improve at this, which is we hired, we have a practice called Union Square Practice. Just to confuse things, it's in Chelsea, don't ask. Anyway, we hired a couples therapist many years ago. And this couples therapist was doing a couples therapy style called Imago. Who here has, raise your hand if you've heard of Imago. Anyone here been trained in Imago at all? Or? Okay, so I was really into what he was talking about. Because to me it sounded a lot like the work I do in performance and coaching with firefighters and you name it, surgeons. And it was a lot about like coaching for your relationship. I really liked it. And it built on some of the strong couples work we'd done in the past. And so I was really interested in it. And nothing particularly was up at the time, but I was really interested in the idea here that it was about learning a dialogue about how to communicate and sticking to kind of a certain rhythm in how you communicate with your partner. So I go home, kitchen counter, and Rosa is on the other side. I'm like, hey, there's this cool thing called imago therapy, and it's all about like learning how to, there's these steps, and what you do is you say, hey, can I, I've had a reaction, can we talk about it? The other person has to say yes, and then you say what your thing is, but you say it in the I way, and then the person says, hey, listen, let me summarize, and then they validate, and then they empathize, like, it's so cool. I'm like, it's kind of like, it'd be great. I mean, nothing's wrong, but we could just work. So one of those moments in your relationship, I don't know if you've had them, I have, where you something's wrong, but you can't quite figure out what it is yet. So I'm like, what, you don't want to go? So Rosa says, I've been telling you about imago therapy for 3 years. So I'm telling this story at my expense because I think what I'm saying is, hey, I'm a clinical psychologist, I do this work all the time. We all have gaps in our listening. And a lot of this approach is about trying to improve, even if you think you're a 99% listener. It's trying to get a little bit better at how we listen to the people in front of us, especially the ones that frustrate us and the ones that keep seeming to say the same things, right? So just think of someone that's frustrating. You have that person in your head in your practice, or that you're not that they're frustrating, but you're frustrated. Raise your hand if you have a person in your practice like that. Great. So try to take that person through this next 30 minutes and see what, if anything, might help. What we're talking about here in the idea of motivational interviewing, I'm going to give you a definition, but one of the ideas in the spirit of motivational interviewing that Bill and Steve talk a lot about is, with a group like this too, I'm going to tell you about the techniques, but I think it's less important than really focusing on the underlying idea of what we're trying to do. Because many people in this room know about some of the techniques, but I'm going to go through and introduce them like you've never seen them before. But the underlying idea here is that motivational interviewing thinks of the relationship between a counselor or a doctor or a parole or probation officer, where this has also happened. As I said, I feel really lucky to have taken this approach and trained rheumatologists in Dubai, and trained firefighters, and trained surgeons, and trained social workers in inpatient units. It's really, I think of MI as the universal donor to any conversation in some way. And to get us back to the fundamental idea of what's actually helpful in talking to people. One, this idea of partnership, right? That we may be an expert. I might have 20 years doing MI, but even in this conversation, I don't assume that I'm more expert than you in how you do your work. And the same with our client. I might be a real expert on addiction, right? In fact, I was trained in addictions, and one of my graduate advisors was Alan Marlatt. But when I sit down with someone, I don't think, just because I've been trained by people like Alan Marlatt and Mary Larimer, that I know more than someone else about their cocaine habit at all. And I frequently say to people all the time, look, you're the expert on you, not me. I can give you some ideas and we can work this through together, but it's your choice if and how you want to change. Another way to think about this is, I was exposed to Marsha Linehan in my graduate training program, and we all went through her assessment of a suicide behavior. And one of the things she did, which was crazy and scary at the time, being 23 years old, was you had to go around the room and out loud in front of the whole group say what your belief was about whether people should be allowed to kill themselves and why, and justify your reasoning why, in a group of second or third year graduate students. It was like one of the most scary things I've actually ever done, I think, in some ways. It's like up there with skydiving. I think that and skydiving are about the same. What I really realized in that talk was that there's this idea that people's values are important, and sometimes we try to push our values, even in the subtlest of way, onto someone else. And this approach assumes that everybody has the choice to do what they want to do. And we'll get into that later, and I'm sure you guys have some questions about that when we work through the techniques. The other ideas are rooted in client-centered therapy, Rogerian ideas about compassion and acceptance, just fundamental to this approach. And Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick, the founders, would say that approach of being client-centered and fundamentally kind and with the person are the foundations of this approach. That's supportive and accurate empathy. That's foundational. Where this diverts a little bit is this idea of evocation, which is really finding out from the person why they want to change. And assuming that that's an art form that can be developed to the nth degree. It's really about this idea of all change is promoted by intrinsic or internal motivation. And the deeper you get to understand what people's values are and how the behavior relates to that internal system of change, deeply like self-determination theory, why do they want to change? And to help them articulate it, that's fundamental to this approach. So really the mistake that we make a lot in treatment is that we think that everybody who comes into treatment is ready to change in some way. And by think that I mean we act that way. But a lot of times there's ambivalence about change. What's really interesting in sports is if you ask the average Major League Baseball player or NFL player, what sport would you like to play? These are professional athletes. If you could play any sport, what do they say? What do the baseball players say? What do the football players say? They both say basketball. So, there's lots of ambivalence even about things that we're doing and that we're enjoying in life. And so making the assumption that most people are ambivalent about even the best things in life, marriages, kids, all these things, and that and I'll talk about in a minute, the target of MI is actually really not people changing. The target of MI is getting really good at helping people to resolve ambivalence. Because if people resolve ambivalence, they're more likely to change. And so this is an art form at helping people resolve ambivalence. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So what is motivational interviewing? I'm going to give you two definitions. And these are from the third edition of the book. The book, Steve and Bill's book is now in the third edition. I think that book is, literally, it's like the Harry Potter of psychology books. I can't believe how far-reaching and how many languages it's been translated in. And I think the reason why is because it speaks to a fundamental idea that many of us hold dear, which is that the fundamental idea of being a counselor is, okay, I don't want to say that thing about people dying and this, I don't want to make another joke about that. So everybody okay? Here, wait, let's switch this chair up. Why don't we get up carefully and switch your chair?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Sure. There we go. Thanks so much. All right. What's that? Sometimes you just got to do it. I'll tell you, when my kids run into the street, there's no MI. Just grab them by the shirt. Whoa. So, and actually to your point, just to clarify, because sometimes maybe we'll answer this question ahead of time. The question is like, well, is there points where you're not going to take that stance? Absolutely. If someone's about to fall off their chair, you're going to grab them. And if, although even suicide assessment, I try to stick to an MI approach. So recently, we had someone call Union Square Practice, and they were suicidal on the call. So I had to run up, and we're talking with our clinical coordinator. Where's Emma? Emma? Not here. Okay, so Emma's not here, but if she were here, she would know that we had this crazy experience where essentially what happened was this person called up, and on the phone, they're suicidal, which rarely happens. And I noticed I was gravitating towards more of a kind of fix-it type attitude. But where MI can help there is it helped me actually to be empathic as I was doing a suicide assessment, right? So I think, we think that MI can't fit into these situations, but it can. It just sort of helps us gravitate towards these core values. So what's the definition of MI? One definition from the third edition of the book is, this is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. So when you go home and your partner or your friend, your significant other asks you what you were doing at the training, this might be a way you explain to them if they're not a mental health professional. But what about us as people who are practicing motivational interviewing? Motivational interviewing is a person-centered counseling style for addressing the common ambivalence about change. You're helping people work through their ambivalence. And I think this is critical, and for me it's been foundational, because a lot of times I personally get caught up in the pain of someone's life and my desire to effect change or help them get better. And this is a performance psychology concept, and may sound revolutionary, but I have no impact on whether they choose to change. That's up to them. What I believe I have an impact on is showing up with the most enthusiasm, the most compassion I possibly can, and to help them resolve their ambivalence about change. And I believe that makes me more effective as a counselor. If I can help them to resolve their ambivalence and really be present in that conversation and use all the techniques and availability and kindness that I have, they're more likely to change. But actually me letting go of whether or not they change makes me more able to work through what they're dealing with. And to me, that's been something I've been working on my whole life, because every day I revert. I got an email coming here of someone whose wife was emailing me because they had relapsed in substance abuse. And I almost jumped in and was like, all right, I mean, the things I was thinking about saying to this person were so much more directive and wouldn't have helped at all. So it's about coming back to that writing reflex and realizing what can you do to calm yourself down in that moment so we don't revert back to an unhelpful way of being. So I want to show you a quick video on this idea of empathy, because I think we're all at different learning points about this. But you know, you ever been in that situation where you find like an excellent pizza spot or something like that in your neighborhood, or a coffee shop, and you start to tell people about it? No one goes there. And then you start to tell people about it, and then all of a sudden it's really full, and you're like, I discovered that first. This is a stretch because I didn't discover Brene Brown, but I kind of feel like that about her. Like, I started telling people about Brene Brown like 10 years ago, and now everybody's telling me about Brene Brown, and I'm like, so, you know, I think of her more as an inspiration than a discovery. And if you haven't seen her Netflix special, it's amazing. I think it's really, really high quality, and I recommend it to clients all the time. But Brene talks a lot about this idea of empathy and deep listening and shame and vulnerability. And she has a really great quick video I just want to show you about empathy, just to get us on the same page about what we're talking about and how this is so central to the approach of motivational interviewing.